Karl Konrad, and welcome to Australian Immigration News, proudly brought to you by Australian Immigration Law Services here in Sydney. The Labor government will prioritise 60,000 offshore visa applications in the coming months. The Minister for Home Affairs, Claire O'Neill, on the ABC Radio National Breakfast Show, indicated the size of the problem regarding the visa backlog and indicated they will prioritise 60,000 offshore applications.
So in a bid to rapidly address areas of dire shortage, such as health, education and aged care, the Albanese government will now prioritise processing the almost 60,000 permanent visa applications lodged by skilled workers based overseas. Claire O'Neill is the Minister for Home Affairs and Cyber Security, and she joins us this morning on RM Breakfast. Minister, welcome.
Good morning, PK. Great to be with you.
A cut of more than $800 million in the Home Affairs Department dramatically slowed visa processing. How quickly do you believe you can get these 60,000 permanent visa applications processed, and how important is that for the economy?
It's very important for the economy, PK. If we just step back a little bit, the most important piece of context here is that we've just come through an unprecedented period in our history where the borders were shut for almost 2 years. So at the other end of that, we have a business community and an economy that's crying out for more workers and an enormous visa backlog. Now, when I arrived in my role 2 months ago, I came into the job with 1 million unprocessed visas sitting in the system, and the former government had made no plan for how we were going to work through that backlog. So the really urgent priority for me and for Minister Andrew Giles, who shares this responsibility with me, is what can we do within the constraints of the current system to quickly work through that backlog. So we've very much increased the staffing who deal with this area of visa processing, but the other big change that we've made that you foreshadowed is a shift to how we prioritise these visas. What many people probably don't realise is a lot of the people who are given visas to work in Australia are actually already here. And if we continue to operate that way, of course, we're not going to address the skills crisis. So the change is prioritising people who are offshore, who are wanting to come here to work, and working through those applications as quickly as we can.
Unfortunately, no mention of those already in Australia waiting for years for their PR applications to be processed. The Minister also flagged the Global Talent Visa was to be considered as wasting millions of dollars of taxpayers' money by immigration officials scouring the globe for offshore talent, saying that 77% of the Global Talent Visas were in fact awarded to applicants already in Australia anyway on various other visas that they themselves could have a PR pathway. Only offshore applicants from now on will be considered for the Global Talent Visa. The Sydney Morning Herald ran a story highlighting the visa processing delays in the 482 employer-sponsored visas. Out of 250 offshore nurses who responded to a St Vincent's Hospital recruitment drive for Australia, only 5 had received their visas. The hospital spokesperson was quoted as saying, "The significant time to process the relevant visas for eligible candidates and the lack of government funding to support the healthcare workers to Australia were the key impediments to sourcing staff." It's a bad sign if the Immigration Department can't even get our critical sector workers into Australia in a timely manner, especially when there are so many stuck in COVID-19 isolation or worse. In other news this week, Tasmania released some of its details of the state sponsorship requirements, but is still holding off on the rest until the federal government releases a budget number for sponsoring places for this financial year. The details released were no different to those released earlier on this year, and if you missed that video and the article we wrote, we'll leave a link in the description below. Despite the Liberal government handing down a budget earlier this year with the increases in state sponsorship places, roughly double of the previous year, the Labor government seems to be waiting until the October budget before allocating places to the states and territory to use. This is unexpected to say the least, and it now leaves both international students and former international students in limbo in choosing which state to move to or study in. Not exactly the economic progress the government had promised after the election. It is possible the Labor government could allocate some places if they wanted to, and we're not sure why they haven't done so already. During his visit to Fiji last week, the Prime Minister announced the Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme has been expanded to the services industry and will now include aged care, tourism and hospitality. This was much to the delight of local Fijians who have been big participants in this scheme for many years. In the past, this scheme has been focused on industries such as agriculture and other blue-collar sectors, and the Prime Minister, Mr Albanese, said the expansion would allow for more workers in industries where there had been workforce shortages. He said this is good for our Pacific Island neighbours because what it enables is more women to participate in the scheme. So what's happened to the proposed agricultural visa, you ask? Well, that's a very good question. Well, that's it for another jam-packed week of Australian immigration news. Things are hotting up here in Australia despite being in the depths of winter. I'd love to be a fly on the wall of the Immigration Minister's office right now during these interesting days of change. So stay tuned for more updates by subscribing to our channel, and as always, take care out there and I'll see you next time. So bye for now.